Erev Shabbos, this week we read from Parshas Naso. Naso begins with the mandate for the family of Gershon. Gershon was a family within the Levi tribe, and their stewardship was to be in charge of the transportation of the vessels of the Mishkan, but not necessarily the holy vessels of the Mishkan, but rather, as the Torah says, lavodo lamasa, to carry the heavy lifting, the curtains and other heavier items, the hooks and so on and so forth, not as heavy as what their cousins from the Bnei Merari had to carry, which was the beams and the pillars and so on and so forth. But the Torah does say, Zoza Bodas Mishpachos Bnei Gershuni, this is the work of the family of Gershon, Lavoda Ulamasa. Lavoda Masa, the work and the carrying. In Yiddish, there's a term for that, and I think even not all Yiddish speakers would perhaps understand the term schleppers. Schleppers, people that carry heavy items. Now, when we think about schleppers or schlepping, we don't necessarily conjure these images of spiritual, these spiritual images in our mind. It's usually like schwitzing and huffing and puffing, heavy lifting, heavy items. I'm thinking about this heavy pulpit over here. If I had to schlep that, it wouldn't be the easiest task. So what is this idea that Gershon this was considered like a holy task, especially contrasting that to the end of last week's Parsha, where the Kahas family, their cousins, the Kahas, it says about Kahas, Zosa Bodas B'nei Kahas, the Kahas was Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies, with the stewardship of Kahas. They were transporting the ark, the menorah, the shulchan, those were the pristine, most exalted parts of the service. Gershon and Merari, they were involved in the schlepping, the schwitzing, not exactly the most exalted parts of the service. So what's going on over here? So I think this teaches us a very profound lesson in Avodas Hashem and in community service in particular. And that is that many times we associate community service with these lofty images of inspirational work. And sometimes it is. Sometimes it is inspirational. Sometimes we find it very lofty and exalting and very meaningful. But sometimes it's in the trenches. Sometimes you have to roll up your sleeves. Sometimes it's staying up long nights and long meetings and phone calls and sometimes it's fundraising and sometimes it's marketing and sometimes it's cleaning up after an event and sometimes it's not all that inspirational. And sometimes it's schwitzing and sometimes it's schlepping and sometimes you wonder why it doesn't feel like you're floating in the clouds. And that's when we have to remember the story of the Bnei Gershon and the Bnei Merari. And that's when we have to remember the lesson, what God told Moshe to tell the Bnei Gershon. Zoza Bodas Mishpachos Bnei Gershon, Lavodo Masa. That sometimes schlepping and schwitzing is also very valuable if it's done for the community with heaven's sake in mind. As long as a person is L'Shem Shemayim, as long as a person means for the sake of heaven, it doesn't matter what they're doing, it doesn't matter how exalted or seemingly mundane the task is. It doesn't matter how much or how little a person's job is, it doesn't matter how exalted or how mundane the individual's task is. What matters is the intent of the person, how motivated the person is to be connected to God and the community. If that's the person's intent, that's what's most meaningful. That was God's message to the family of Gershon. That's God's message to each and every one of us. I wish you all a good Erev Shabbos.